So we're just gonna do a little video here on a 1990 Dodge W250. Just how to change the rear brake slave cylinder on one of these. It's a little different than most newer stuff. Obviously disc brakes, but even the second gens, it's different style. So do a quick little video on it. Kind of the basic tools you need. 3/8 wrench for brake line, 9/16, 1/2 inch 3/8 ratchet, and a 13/16 for the lug nuts. And then I got a new brake cylinder, brake fluid, a new brake line because there's a good chance it's going to be damaged. And yeah, and a torque wrench obviously when you go to put the tire back on. And you'll need some RTV too to seal that axle shaft, or the gasket to seal that axle shaft back up when you pull it. So you'll have to remove the tire, these bolts, pull the axle shaft out, store it somewhere it's not gonna get dirty. And then I like to jack the truck up so it's on an angle so that the side you're working on is quite a bit higher, so that the diff oil doesn't leak out the side you're working on. Saves you from having to top it up. And then yeah, I just block it and leave the jack kind of there so to help support it. But yeah, so we'll start taking everything apart and then show you guys some more. So we got the wheel off and those bolts out, remove the axle shaft. So there's a little tab here for locking this nut on. You have to remove that. Just use a screwdriver and pop it out. And then if you have the proper size socket, you can use a socket to remove this nut, or you can see as somebody who's previously been in here used a chisel and a hammer, which isn't really the right way to do it, but it works. So I ended up buying the proper socket for doing the nut there for the bearing on the rear axle. So that's an OTC part number 6928. We have a couple of these trucks, so it's worth having the tool. It was like 50 bucks. So yeah, pays to have the proper tool for the job. So we got that nut off there, just laying everything out on something clean, and then we'll you just pull on this guy here, and just make sure you don't drop the wheel bearing. Pile of dirt. And then I just like to use a bucket like that to hold it so all the oil can drip out of that end, and then we'll clean that up before we put it back on. But you can see here, now you have access to that sleeve, so we'll get that thing removed. So now we're on the back side here. You can see the brake line runs in, so you have to remove that. It's a 3/8 wrench. And then, yeah, they're easy to strip. If you got a line wrench, that works even better. And then 2 1/2-inch headed bolts there. So you need a 1/2-inch socket. And then that slave will be free in there. And should be able to get that slave out without having to take all the brakes apart. So yeah, we'll get that all removed. So we got those bolts out. A little trick for getting that brake line loose, especially if you don't have a line wrench and it's wanting to slip on you before you strip it. It doesn't hurt to put some penetrating lube on there so it spins freely on that line. And then take a punch or a chisel and just hit this way on there just to free it. It just breaks it loose. That, or you're definitely gonna have to probably replace the whole brake line, right? So this can save you some money and some heartache. So we got all the stuff from the back removed. So what I do is once that brake line's removed, it's a lot easier to just either pull the plunger out of there or push it all the way in, because now there's no pressure there. So I just have to give her a little smack with a hammer to break it loose. As you can see, it's pretty rusty. But if you don't want to take the brakes apart because you don't have the parts or whatever the deal is, and you just want to get that off, you can just do that and you can pull that right out of there and slide a new one in without having to take all the springs and stuff apart. So in a perfect world, you'd replace it all and be new and not have to come back in here. But we're just changing this, so that's the way I'm going to do it. So we got the slave cylinder in, this drum back on, and the bearing put in. We just ran it in with the ratchet with that new socket we got. And then we're just gonna torque it. The spec we found was 140 foot-pounds, and then back it off 1/3 of a turn. And then you can check the end play. I think it says 5 to 8 thou, somewhere in there. So yeah, we'll torque that up then and get ready to put that axle shaft in. So you can see we're 0 thou there, and then when we put pressure on this way or in, see we're 5, 0, 5. So right where we want to be. So we got this surface all cleaned up for this axle shaft to go back in. Same thing on the axle shaft, and we use some stuff called the right stuff. It's really good. Never had an issue with it leaking or anything. So, and yeah, it like cures instantly. And then we put that lock back in. Don't forget that guy. And then yeah, we'll slide this axle shaft in and torque to 70 foot-pounds for these bolts. And then the tire can go back on, and I torque them to 140. So we got the tire mounted and torqued to 140, and the axle shaft bolts there are torqued to 70 foot-pounds. So all you got to do now is just bleed the brakes. And yeah, if you lost some diff oil, obviously check your diff oil level, make sure it's good. And then, yeah, you're good to go.